Welcome everybody. My name is Hana Winchester, and this is our presentation, an exploration of intersectionality in technology, software development, and use. First, here's an overview of what we'll be discussing in today's presentation. We will first explain the concept of intersectionality and why it is important. And we will then take this idea and talk about its focus within tech and introduce 3 guiding questions that we attempted to answer with our research. Using our questions, we will explain our methods and the results of our research. And we will then use these results to show what can be done in the future to further these types of studies and to make intersectionality a bigger focus in the field of software engineering. So what is intersectionality? Intersectionality means that 2 or more identities overlap, and the collective identity that they form is intersectional, meaning that the person belongs to many different groups, but all of these groups connect within them. Intersectional qualities include race, sex, ability or disability, language, sexual orientation, and so many more. And an example of some of these overlapping would be Black women, Native American males, and you can even add in the factors like disability to have groups like disabled Black women or able-bodied Native American males, etc. And the term intersectionality originated in 1989 when Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor and civil rights activist, used it to explain that ideas such as anti-racism and feminism alone did not fully include the most marginalized communities whose identities overlapped. And in her case, this was Black women. So why is this important? It's important to consider intersectional identities in developing modern tools because this is the best way to eliminate the risk of these populations experiencing disadvantage or discrimination because of their intersecting identities. And you can better understand intersectionality by thinking of multiple roads intersecting. Just imagine that each path represents a single identity, and when these paths cross, they form an overlapping point, just like when 2 or more identities intersect. Here's one of Kimberly Crenshaw's quotes that perfectly summarizes why we need to consider intersectionality. If we are an intersectional, some of us, the most vulnerable, are going to fall through the cracks. So with that in mind, in our research, we applied the same theoretical framework to the field of computer science and technology. Our goal was to answer 3 main questions. First, what is the landscape of intersectional identities in technology development and use? Then, where are intersectional identities contributing data? And how do marginalized populations feel about the impact technology has on their day-to-day lives? So to begin our exploration of intersectionality in tech, we designed a survey to collect data from software developers and users. And the survey asks a series of questions pertaining to race, religion, sex, ability, age, platforms interacted with and contributed to, etc. And we wanted our survey to tell us more about intersectional qualities among participants, but also about how these qualities affect participants' day-to-day lives. So to make our survey more user-friendly, we decided to ask most of our questions in a multiple choice format. And to account for participants belonging to more than one category within a question, for example, race, we allowed participants to select multiple choices for certain questions. We also included a small amount of pre-response questions to better understand the unique ways that our participants have been affected by their identities. And here are some examples of what those different types of questions would look like. Here's our order of methods. So first, as we saw on the last slide, we designed our survey. But before distributing it, we actually ran a pilot with current computer science students at George Mason University. And from that, we were able to get 6 responses. And once we got our study approved, we distributed our survey using various mediums and platforms. Due to this project being part of a summer internship program, we were not able to leave our data collection window open for very long. And our data collection ended up lasting around 1 month. Our original goal was to have 200 respondents, but we ended up collecting 23 responses. And of those, we determined that 12 were usable, which meant that the respondents did not leave fields empty. And although our data set was a lot smaller than we had hoped, we were still able to draw inferences from the trends we observed. So before we share our results of our analyses, here are some of our respondent demographics. Our data included the following intersectional race and gender pairs: 3 white males, 3 white females, 1 South Asian male, 1 South Asian female, 1 West Asian male, 1 Korean male, 1 Latin American male, and 1 unspecified male. And we received responses from respondents ages 25 through 74. And our respondents included software engineers, tenure track faculty, and PhD students. And our respondents identified as heterosexual, asexual, and pansexual, and they also represented the following religious affiliations: agnostic or atheist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim. And because our sample size was small, we primarily used visualizations and manual qualitative analysis to explore and interpret survey responses. We will now discuss some of our results. Within our limited sample size, there were many general trends as seen in the left graphs, with a majority of all respondents or no respondents having similar habits of platform contribution, interaction, etc. And we did see a few trends in our data that we believe could be a reflection of the real world, but more data and exploration would be needed to determine this. One such inference we have is that Caucasian males tend to have a higher presence on Twitter. And another trend we observed was that women represented a higher proportion of older respondents than in the younger respondents. And we believe that this could be a historical tie, as the field of computer programming was first a feminized profession, but after World War II, government leaders did not want women to have the higher paying jobs, and this led to women being systemically pushed out of technology. An important and obvious observation we have from our work is that there's definitely a need for more exploration in this topic of intersectionality in software development and in the field of technology in general. And from our work, we have gathered inferences about trends in the field of technology, but more work needs to be done to solidify and to add to our findings. We also propose a tool to directly help data scientists and engineers in remembering intersectionality in their innovations. We believe that this tool could check data sets to make sure they're representing minority populations equally. And if not, it could recommend similar identities to add. This is different than normal procedures of removing data points because it also adds the possibility of including identities that never existed in the data set to begin with. This could help to remove bias in many different applications and modern tools, such as in AI. And on the bottom of the slide is an example of how this process might work. Here are our major citations. And lastly, I would like to thank my amazing mentors and collaborators, Dr. Brittany Johnson and Dr. Alicia Boyd. I would also like to thank the Inspired Lab. And I would like to thank the source of this project, George Mason University Aspiring Scientist Summer Internship Program. This is a program that exposes high school and undergrad students to research methods and helps them to develop skills and passion for learning about various fields of science. Thank you. And are there any questions?
Let me ask a question, Hana. Are you a undergraduate or are you a high schooler?
I'm actually a junior in high school. I'll be a senior next year.
This is just fantastic, Hana, for you to do work and write research paper and come and give a talk. So like major congratulations. You did fantastic.
Thank you.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Can I ask a hard question to Brittany then?
Okay.
So one of the things, this is like an overall question. I don't think there's an answer, but this is more for discussion for later, I think, is intersectionality is so important. But one of the things I'm having a hard time is finding enough data points, right? Because if you do gender plus race plus education plus language, then you're left with like 2 data points or 1 data point, right? So how do we, like, this is more like a research idea, like how do we go about doing intersectionality, because it's just a hard problem with data.
Yeah.
And data science have more data, but if you go to software engineer, then we are just really low.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so like with our tool proposal, we're also working on this idea, and we're working on ways to pull in probably also more disparate data sets, also through sources like Neo4j or MongoDB, etc. And
Ooh, she froze
it
for
connects
me.
with our proposed tool to assist equal distribution of data in the data sets also.
So my service isn't great. Can you guys hear me right now?
Yes.
We can hear.
Okay, so yeah, so Hana made some great points around kind of the tooling aspect of it, where we really want to explore how we can help developers make use, of course, as you were mentioning, of the data that they do have or can get access to. But I think a really important part of this is the intentionality of not just using what's there and hoping to get something meaningful out of it, but kind of being intentional and even taking a deeper dive into better understanding how we engage with populations to get that data. And because I think that's historically been an issue where, the data that we have is the data that kind of comes to us. And the data that comes to us is always going to be a certain population, almost always. And so I think that there's a level of intentionality that needs to still be understood, which is, I think, where the research comes in. And then being able to propagate processes and frameworks and tools that are validated in some meaningful way to provide support in these niche settings, because it definitely is very challenging. And for us, although our survey wasn't out that long, we definitely anticipated getting a little more diversity in our data set than we did. So I think the intentionality piece and really understanding, kind of like our research questions suggest, where are the diverse populations interacting, contributing data, right? And where can we get those meaningful contributions to then make these more meaningful, diverse, representative data sets? But I think it is going to be a challenging problem to solve for sure.
And hi everyone, my name is Alicia Boyd. I'm also an author on this work, and working with intersectionality, and this really ties back into not only what Hana and Brittany was saying, but also our previous conversations about what does diversity look like, what does intersectionality, and introducing these different concepts into this space. With my work, I recommend first really defining what you are looking for and what those definitions mean, because depending on what those definitions are, you're going to start at different points. And then with intersectionality, if you really root it in, Professor Crenshaw's definition in her work, you really have to take yourself out of a dominant frame of thinking and really approach problems and methodologies on the margins and be creative to what that looks like. So it's not going to be obvious about how to approach the problem, but yet it gives potential and understanding and to see what that looks like. And you can build the community aspect in it as well to form these different relationships with these different intersectional communities.
I absolutely love the topic and the ideas all of you brought in. So Alicia, I'm thinking this is a great workshop for next year. Like, I love how you said we should get out of the dominant way of thinking, because it's so hard to do, right? I think I am in the minority, but I am still thinking the dominant category because I'm educated, I'm a professor, I have power. I forget that. So I would love to have a workshop where we learn how to step out of the dominant role. That would be awesome.
Yes, no, I totally agree, because even though I hold the intersections of being Black and woman, again, like you said, I have a privilege. I have, a doctorate, I have economic opportunities, like I'm high end. So what does that look like? So my experience is on like a spectrum compared to others and everything. So again, it's the intersectionality. If you really get into Crenshaw's work and then later Collins, it really challenges you to just really take a step back and really observe what is happening. And that's that reflexivity component of intersectionality that really allows you to engage in it. So you can't be halfway in, halfway out with intersectionality, just like diversity. So you really have to go all in and really, take the time and be patient, and strategize what this looks like to really be inclusive.
Thank you to all. I think